Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And if you follow the business news, you know that there's a lot of attention being paid now to the subject of innovation. What is it? How do you get it? How do businesses achieve it? So tonight we're going to take an interesting perspective on innovation. We're going to talk about intuitive intelligence. Our guest, Therese Rowley, is an expert on intuitive intelligence and intuitive business consultant. Yes?
Yes.
So it's such an intriguing title. So tell us, what do you do as an intuitive business consultant? Do you consult only to intuitive businesses?
No, that's a good question, though, because intuition belongs to all of us, doesn't it? We all have intuition in one way or another, but not all of us claim that. I've spent 30 years in business doing large-scale systems change, partnering with leaders during change, and what I found is that when leaders are about to make a significant change, inside themselves, something has to grow as well personally in order for them to accommodate all of the parts of change and to move to the next level of leadership that is required at the end of that change. So I work with them personally, I help them with the organizational strategy, and I also happen to be an intuitive, so I use that skill to help with all of the change from personal to organizational.
So do they have any idea what they're getting into when they bring you on? And this is all going to come back to them as in a very personal manner?
Well, you know, it used to be, I've done work inside of large corporations like AT&T, and what I used to say to them is, if you're calling me, it's because you're really ready to go to the next level personally, even if you don't know that. So if you're not ready for that, you probably shouldn't work with me.
Call me later.
Yes, I want to let them know so that they're not too over the top. And a lot of times they've said, I'm not sure, and then later come back and said, now I'm ready.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you get resistance to that sometimes when you...
Absolutely, because some leaders want to come into a new situation and they say, well, as soon as I change them, and as soon as they change, everything will be good. Here's our plan. And I think, oh, you just don't know what you're in for here. It's going to affect you, and I'm sorry, but we're going to, and I don't say that because sometimes that's where we need to start. But it becomes evident over time that the way that they say things, the manner in which they say it, how they include a group, exclude people, how they speak, and a lot of the ways that they operationalize their values in decision making are all important aspects of going to another level of expansion in a business, whether it's merger, acquisition, or really an organizational change.
So do you find that the people who are willing to look at it from a personal point of view are people who are coming into a new position and see themselves as agents of change? Or is it more likely that someone who has been there who realizes that, gee, things aren't going the way we need them to go and we need to make some sort of changes? Do you see a bias one or the other?
Well, it's really, really both. And each of those perspectives come with different challenges. If you've been in an organization for a very long time and you are charged with making a change, that's difficult because you really didn't sign up for that when you became that leader in that mid-level or high level in the organization. So you have to find a way to bring yourself to that place, and that's often when a skilled companion is helpful in that process. Along with understanding that when the organization makes a change, again, that's going to impact you. The organization impacts you, you impact the organization by who you are as a leader and how you operationalize the entire change process.
So let's take the person who's been there for a long time, and let's say I'm a CEO of a mid-sized company and I realize that my shareholders are unhappy that things aren't going the way they need to go. So how would you approach, if I were to call you, how would you approach that? And how would you begin to tell me, oh, maybe you have to change? Because, of course, I'm perfect or I wouldn't be where I am, right?
That's right. And I want to reinforce that you, in fact, are perfect, or you wouldn't be in the place that you're in now. And that is something that's important that I do emphasize. And that is that if you're where you are in the company, you have done strategies that have been successful for yourself and the company such that you're ready for the next level. You're going to stand on the shoulders of your success. This is not to say what you did was wrong. This is to say, how do we stand on the shoulders of that success, include all the strengths that you have amassed and hard-earned with your team, and how do we use that and build to the future that might be a little different pathway than expected. So while we, yes, have to look at what are the phases of change, so I use a lot of tools for both the organization's teams that are changing as well as the leader. And in one of those, and you know, one of the tools is Kubler-Ross's death and dying model.
Oh, really?
That's been adapted for business.
Now that sounds pretty scary. It's like
Yeah,
your
now we're
business is
talking
going
about
to die, so we're going to go through the phases of acceptance here.
Yes.
No, people wouldn't want to hear that, I would
That's
think.
right. But what's true is that whether you're going to something great or something that you are anticipating as not so great, either way, it's an important and significant change, and you're losing something.
Something has to be left behind.
And something must be grieved. And the way that we do that organizationally is that oftentimes we will have processes that allow people to talk about what is the strength that you have used to become who you are here, that you love about this place, that you want to continue or pass on, and what are the things that you'd really like to leave behind. And we often take the things that you leave behind. I did this with one organization. They literally went out and buried some of those artifacts that they didn't want with them, and then they made some plaques about the part of the values they wanted to keep. And that's very important because it's so personal. You know, each person has a purpose in what they're doing, and they need to feel that they've been brought along, the organization's going along, and then and there's emotional phases of change, which are often unaddressed in organizations, whether it's with the leader or with the organization.
Because we're professionals.
That's
We don't run by emotion.
That's right. We don't have feelings if we're professionals.
Right, right.
And I was told that. I was a consultant at a Big Six consulting
Someone actually
firm.
said that to you?
Oh, yes. I was one of a few women and in a worldwide organization, a top consulting firm, mostly in men, in logistics, manufacturing operations, and I was working in that realm, and I was indeed told that we are professionals, we don't have emotions here, we leave our emotions at home. Now, 15 years later, I was teaching worldwide that organization about intuitive and emotional intelligence, so karma is what it is. But, you know,
And in fact, it's, not to tell you, you know this, but emotional intelligence is one of the great buzzwords now in business.
That's right.
What is your level of emotional intelligence? You know, how do you bring your emotions to bear, and how do you recognize what's being an emotional reaction and what isn't?
That's right, and we now know that high emotional intelligence is more important in leadership success than IQ. That's been studied around the world, and all of the work that's been done by Goldman and his team, his book was on the bestseller list for 30 years.
30.
In many countries. So, I mean, because what we've done in business for so long is decided that, well, we're not really human beings. We're human doings, and we're not human beings. And so the part of us that is emotional really shouldn't be cared for. And what happens, and what's been studied, and this is where my work in my Ph.D. program was to look at, if you don't take care of that, you get to pay the cost later on. There's sabotage.
Pay me now, pay me later.
Yeah, that's right. There's sabotage. There's, oh yeah, you think I'm going there? Watch me not go there. And it takes a lot of organizational energy and expense to take care of something because you didn't want to acknowledge that human beings, they're very clever people and they have what they have and they want what they want. So how do we honor that in the process of change? And those are the tools that we bring to bear to assure that everyone knows that they're included and valued in the change process.
Now, it's interesting because one of the things, I occasionally do a guest lecture at Robert Morris University, and it's about how to get things done in organizations. And one of the points of this is that if you want to make change, somebody's going to lose because something that's valuable to someone is going to be changed. Either they've always done it that way, or they really believe it's the right way, or whatever. But something has to change, and there will be losers in this change. So how do you address that? First of all, how do you identify it? Who are they? And then how do you address that? Because if you want this change to succeed, you have to recognize that that's there, and you have to meet it head on and say, okay, well, you know, you're going to lose this piece. So if I were to tell you, for example, hey, I've got this great innovation, and by the way, your whole department is going to be rendered redundant, and we won't need any of you.
Right.
Well, you're not likely to go along with that. So
That's right. And so there's lots of different ways to deal with that. One, again, understanding that the phases of change, when anybody changes, I mean, you get married, it's a wonderful thing, and you still have the first year people say is the hardest because it's very big change from what you're used to, even if it's a positive one. So acknowledging that human beings when they go through change, they go through loss, all of us, not just the people who said, wait a minute, you changed this, but all of us go through the loss, and then we go into denial.
Even the winners go through some sort of loss, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we need to know strategically how to address when people are in denial. What do you do? And there are specific strategies, such as repeating over and over, "This is where we're going," and the person goes, "Sure," and everything will be fine, and then that'll go away, and we'll all be fine again. But in fact, what we need to do is keep repeating it until they go into the phase called resistance. So we actually want to move them into resistance.
So you can identify where the problems are.
That's right. And also, if someone goes from, "Hey, this is great and it's going to work and all's good," probably they're going to go back and become a person that's angry later on because you really have to go through the phases of, I'm struggling with this. So there's a resistance. And when you get to resistance, there's a particular response. You need to back up and give people room to vent. Oftentimes this is when I'm facilitating change, this is called kill the consultant phase.
You're the bringer of bad news, therefore it's your fault.
That's right, and you know, that's part of what it is to be, when you talk about expertise in the field, there will be a time when people are angry about losing what they loved or what they were used to, even if they didn't love it. It's the devil that they know.
Right.
It will be on the facilitator or the change agent side to be accused of the program not working, or this is why this is happening, and that's all good, because if you're skilled intuitive, you're a skilled facilitator, and as an intuitive, I can feel that energy start to come up, and then it's time for me to say, "Hey, you know, you're angry. Who else feels like that?" And then put it on the board like that's important data. How you feel is data. That's not just, "Oh, go away, you feel that way." And then people start saying, and they go until finally they get to hopeless. And then I stop and I move away, because this is the point at which the team has to decide going forward, this is commitment or I'm out. And the team has to own it. If I owned it and said, "No, it's my program, let me fix it for you," they would lose the opportunity to own the change, and from that point on, be empowered to drive it.
Now, having been in business many years myself, it's the concept of buy-in that people have to they have to have some stake in this, that I want this to succeed because there's part of me in it. How is this different from that traditional buy-in model? When you're talking about identifying the emotional reality, is that a difference in technique in how to achieve buy-in, or is there a different actual level where the buy-in is somehow different?
Well, and this is a very interesting, that's a very good question. And
that's why I'm on the show, because I learn how to ask these questions.
and you are very good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you for being so good. I think that where I distinguish this now is in 2008 I started a conscious business network in Chicago, because people are asking this question about not how do you just get buy-in, but how do you get someone passionate about a change, a direction that you want to go in. Where do you find that the person's individual purpose matches the purpose of the business so that they're bought in at that level? And so I call that conscious business. That's what conscious business means.
Okay.
That you're concerned about people's passion being present in the organization, and that you're creating an environment and a culture that helps them to be able to tap into that and use it as part of the business's expansion and their own personal growth. So that's conscious business, and I distinguish that from traditional business, because traditional business wants your head to be bought in and for you to understand your role and responsibility and move on.
And just do it.
And do
because
it,
it's your
and
job.
do it well, and then I'll
Right.
pay you. And now we know that the millennials, who are now the largest consumer group in history, they want companies that are committed to their values and to operationalizing them, to take responsibility for the communities in which they operate. And talent is important now, because there's not a lot of it where people want it. And so if you want that talent, you better have a company that is conscious, that is committed to the community and engagement in a conscious way, and helps their employees to be engaged in that community so they feel the meaning in their work and the purpose that they're fulfilling in it. So all of those things start to become so much more important in this new marketplace than it's ever been before.
And that would be different from, I think of the traditional Silicon Valley model, where it's a much looser, Silicon Valley reinvented the workplace essentially by saying, well, you don't have to wear a tie and a jacket. Right. And we have ping pong tables set up, and Friday afternoons there's an open bar, and there's always vending machines that don't charge you anything. And there's all those kind of lifestyle things. But is that just kind of the trappings, and you're talking about a different level of reality here?
Yes, really I am. It's interesting because I teach courses. I taught at the University of Chicago Graham School on leadership and intuition. And when I find that the baby boomer generation, sometimes that's a relearning because for baby boomers, it really was restricted to keep your personal life, it was separate from your business life. We don't go there. This is your personal and this is your professional. The millennials are, it's all one thing. And so when I say to, and I did this recently, I said, I'm doing some courses on intuitive intelligence, and this young millennial, he was a vice president for a marketing company, he said, I'm in. He didn't even ask any questions about it. He just said, I'm in, and the other one said, I'm in too. I mean, because they understand that when I am in my center, when I'm grounded, when I have healthy boundaries, I can make better strategic decisions, and it's better for me personally. I feel better about it. I feel more connected to myself, more at peace, and I can make better decisions at work and feel more connected to the work.
Now, one of the things I wonder about, I've just read an article about business people who are working in foreign countries and also foreign policy professionals should read more literature. And the reason is that if you really want to understand a culture or a time or people or an area, that literature is the best way to do that because they tell stories, which we've been talking about. And they tell stories that have great detail. And so you can actually understand a character much better than just reading the economic statistics of a region, for example. So it makes me wonder, business 100 years ago was very successful with these old models that we're talking about. Look, I hire you, I pay you, you do the job, and that's it. And from the Industrial Revolution on, that really is how things worked, and it worked pretty well for a long time. So my question, or what I wonder about, is have the times changed in such a way that we need these new models? Or would these models have been equally successful 100 years ago?
That's a great question. No, I don't believe they would have been, and the reason that they're absolutely critical now is because of the rapid disruption technology that disrupts industries, that takes down the competition in a few days. You can use Twitter for a lot of things, as we all know now in the U.S. And we can interfere with politics on the other side of the world. We could, when one of the big banks decided that they were going to charge for ATMs at a different level, within a day they had so many tweets they had to change the rule again. We can disrupt every kind of company out there, and we have the power to do it. We have international travel, we have technology, we have sharing of knowledge on the internet like it has never been in history, and we have everything that we need to create whatever we want. And this is why, I've been involved with some social enterprise and helping nonprofits to think differently about partnerships. And really, the new idea about social enterprise is, how do I look at a problem or a challenge in society and create a solution through using business tools as a social entrepreneur? And one of my passions is to find a way to bring both intuitive intelligence and the social entrepreneurial skill sets to high schoolers, even grammar schoolers, so that their natural way of thinking is, how do I look at a problem and say, I'm going to make a business out of that? And if that's a second thought for them, if it's just part of their landscape, then our world can be sustainable.
Now, let's not to digress too quickly from that, but you've mentioned the concept of intuitive intelligence a number of times. So let's go into some detail. What is that, and how does it work?
Okay. Intuitive intelligence is because I have, some people are born with chopsticks and they're tone deaf, and some people are born Mozart. So there's different, we start with different gifts. And some people are born and they feel like they have no intuition, or maybe a little, and other people have a lot of it, and they do a lot of things. They help the police find missing things, or they see people who have passed, or they know when someone is sick, or they know who's going to call on the phone, or they even can make a good business decision without a lot of evidence. So intuition is used in a myriad of ways. And what I found in really engaging my intuitive skill for decades is that it is a learnable skill, that you can get skillful in using your intuition to know the best strategic decision for yourself, your family, your community, and your work.
How do you do that? How do you, especially since intuition is seen as kind of voodoo, it's like, well, it's not real, and how do you come back to that? Especially someone at my point in life, where I've learned what I've learned, and I've learned certain ways of thinking and doing things. how do you approach someone, if I were the CEO of a company in my 60s, to say, oh, well, I can teach you this new way of thinking? How do you do that?
Well, I think of it as actually not thinking of a new way of thinking. I think that we take what's true, and Harvard Business Review a while ago came out with a survey and surveyed 100 different very successful CEOs and said, to what do you contribute this phenomenal success? And to a one, they said their intuition. And those are the very people.
All of them?
All of them. And they might have called it a gut feel, or I got this hit, or I just knew. But to a one, they said intuition. Now, if they had said biology, there would be 100 different programs on biology, so we could all learn that and be a good CEO. But
Yeah.
you know there's not very many programs on intuition. Why? Because people think some people have it and some people don't. And they don't know that everybody has it at one level or another, and that it is a brain function, and that it can be practiced, and that the more you trust it, the more you listen to it. Did you ever meet a person who said, oh, I just knew I should have done that. I just had a feeling, and I didn't follow it, and boy, am I glad I didn't. No.
No,
right? No.
that doesn't, it's
never,
always the opposite.
ever happened to anybody ever.
Right.
When you have that knowing, that thing is guiding you to what's best for you in your life. So what if we had the opportunity to really tune into that on a daily basis and use it in everything that we do in life?
As your examples, I'm in. So how do we do that? I mean, what is that technique? How would I, for example, tune in more to my intuitive intelligence?
Well, one of the ways, and I want to say that I think about intuition as a system, because I'm a systems thinker, I'm a business thinker, and I see that we have all kinds of stimulus and data that we're aware of. In this room, you might be aware of the color of the rug, and I might be aware of all of the furniture. Why do we tune in differently? Why do you see the color of the rug and I see the number of furniture and someone else is looking for the exit signs? I mean, each of us tunes in. Why? The Nobel Prize winning brain researchers say that it's because we have our brain is a tuning mechanism for meaning. And my question is, what tunes it and why that meaning? And for me, it seems to me that each of our intuition is tuned to our own purpose. That's why you see color and I see the number of chairs there are in the room, because that's related to my purpose and the color is related to your purpose. So intuition is wired to our purpose and meant to help us in everything in life.
So how come we're so ill-aware of it or unaware of it?
We weren't until about the 14th century when Descartes decided that reason, and it was legitimate in thinking this way, that if we have evidence, we can be in common about what's true. Because I can have an experiment and it's repeatable and you can see it, and therefore we can both believe it together because there's evidence. And when there's no evidence and we're making decisions on no evidence, well, how can we all agree to that? Is that your intuition versus my intuition?
I see, yeah, so it wasn't trustworthy and it wasn't common.
Wasn't common. And in order to make group decisions and strategic change, you want to have things that are in common and that things that people can understand. But then you look at things like when the Challenger went up,
Exploded,
and you know, one person had an intuition and like, don't do it, and the boss said to him, don't say anything. Well, we have the result. So sometimes
I didn't know that. Did someone in ground control or whoever?
Yes, it was an engineer who was convinced that this flight should not happen, and he was going to say something, and his boss just went like this to him, and he said nothing. So when we have an intuition, it's data. It might not be the only data. What I suggest is we do both sides of the brain. The logic side of the brain is much slower than the intuitive side of the brain, and it has to catch up. It waits for themes.
It processes. It goes through sequentially.
Slowly,
right?
and we worship it as though it's the most important. It's actually the least important. Even Einstein said intuition was the most important thing, right? And Einstein was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah,
And so if we tune in, and you know, it's so funny because you say when people go blind, their hearing gets better, it's said, and when people go deaf, their eyesight gets better. Well, when you shut down all five senses, your sixth sense gets better. You go into a meditation or a mindfulness place, that's the basis of just quieting yourself so that you can listen and attune to what's inside.
Is that part of what you teach people then?
That's part of it. That's
part
of it.
Kind of like meditation, quiet all the noise?
That's right. And so quiet all the noise to listen in. And then I want to know, how did you know what you knew? And I challenge everybody to think of the last time you knew something without any evidence. Well, almost everybody can, you know, was it a plane you weren't supposed to take, or somebody you knew was going to call, or was it this, you know, I went this way and I didn't know why, and I found out later there was an accident that way and I would have been involved. What is it that, and then the question is, how did you know? Did you see pictures? Did you hear a voice? Did you feel a sense of feeling? Did you just know it? And those are different kinds of intuitive intelligences.
So there are different varieties of intuitive intelligence.
You might get something in pictures. I always see things in pictures, some people say.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's called clairvoyance. It means clear seeing. I see the whole context, I see what that's about, and that's what that's called. And then there's clairaudience. I hear voices. That's not an indication you should put a jacket on someone backwards. That's actually, that's a kind of intuitive intelligence, and people should know about that.
Depends on what those voices are telling you to do,
True.
perhaps. Yes.
That's true. It does depend on what they're talking. Yeah. But you notice when the aspect of this, one of the unique aspects of clairaudience is, or hearing, clear hearing, is that it's usually directive. Don't get on that plane. Take that thing. Do that. That's what it's usually directive, and it's usually helpful directive. And, well, it's always helpful directive unless it's, as you say, the other kind of voices.
Right.
And then there's feelings. There's people that they go into a room and everybody's smiling and they go, oh, they say, oh, that person's angry. Oh, that person's sad. And they know. How do they know? There's absolutely no way they know. But when they talk to the person, they say, well, yes, something sad happened to me, even though there's smiles on their face. That's a different kind of intuitive intelligence. It's to know that people are emotionally okay, or what's the truth of their emotion.
So do different people have strengths in these different forms of intuitive intelligence?
Everyone has a different strength and preference, just like you might take a personality profile like the Myers-Briggs. You have a particular preference and a particular strength, but you could strengthen all of them, or you can just really use the one that you normally go to. I've said this to business people, you know, as you get better at intuition, if your intuition is meant to get you a better strategic decision making for yourself, if it's meant to do that, and you work really hard, or you do meditation practice all the time, and you listen in, and you really strengthen that, and there's different exercises you can do to strengthen it, you probably won't see dead people after a while, because that's probably not related to your field. You know, that's probably not why you got intuition. I mean, maybe you could, but it's not related. That some people do. They see people who have passed over, they see ghosts, or they see this or that. We have so many shows on television that are fascinated with this, and it's simply a function of the brain. We know that there's vibrations such as carbon monoxide that can kill us, but we can't see it or hear it. There's no five senses that can detect it. The same is true when we talk about what we can perceive.
Now, is there a danger here? I mean, I can foresee someone becoming more tuned to intuitive intelligence and then relying on that in times when perhaps they shouldn't, or ignoring evidence-based reasoning to say, I've got this intuitive intelligence. And, you know, like in investing, for example, I'd say one of the worst things you can do is invest on your gut, because you get clobbered that way. You know, you have to have, you know, a fairly strict methodology for how you invest and what your stops are to keep you from losing a lot of money. Is it possible to go wrong trying to follow your intuitive intelligence?
Yes, but I want to say something about that. I know a guy who was so good at intuition, he took his family to an island and he would lay down and meditate, and when he heard which stocks to invest in, he would, and he got very rich and he did nothing else.
Really?
So the question is, do you know that's your intuition? When it's intuition, it's always good for you. But if your intuition is...
Is that true? When it's your intuition, it's always good for you?
Always good for you. When you think it's intuition and it's not, it's because when you say, well, is that intuition, or is that a thought or a want, right? You have to distinguish. And here's one of the ways you can distinguish. If you are making a decision based on fear, I won't have enough money, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, I got to get my family to get this, probably that's not your intuition talking. That's your fear.
It's just your fear.
When there's fear, intuition can't even show up, because intuition is based on knowing. It's based on all wellness, that all is well, and always all is well. It doesn't work when you're afraid. So...
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have to be, well, and that's part of being mindful, where you have to release all this external energy.
That's right.
And become centered in order to be able to understand what this intuition is, correct?
That's right. And it does help you to become centered when there's a lot of emotional data, I call it, on the field. People are taking in, there's so much data, there's emotional data, and there's information, and there's feelings, or whatever is going on in this space. You have receptor sites that you're taking these in. Your eyes...
I don't mean to cut you off in the middle of a fascinating thought, but we're out of time.
Okay.
And so our audience will just have to intuit what it was you were going to say, and we'll have to pick this up later.
That sounds
so,
great.
Therese, thanks so much for being here.
It was my pleasure.
It's been a great pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Kevin.
And I hope you've also enjoyed tonight's show and learned something perhaps about yourself. So I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. We've been visiting with Therese Rowley. You're watching Public Perspective, and you can see us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, or find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.